Hello and welcome to Web of Light. I'm Angie D'Anjou and this is...
You're too funny, Dr. Kevin.
We're doing something different today at Web of Light, but the one thing we're going to do that we always do is we're going to start it with our words of wisdom. And our wisdom purveyor today is none other than Miss Angie. Miss Angie, would you like to share? What? Miss Angie.
Okay, we're going to go to Miss Angie.
Miss Angie, Miss Angie, yes, Miss Angie. Share your quote.
Yes, and so time to share the quote. This quote is I received it from Terry Pratchett, who is the author of The Hogfather, along with many other quotes, many other books in regards to, he actually did a lot of series of make-believe, lovely, beautiful books that really were intriguing and diverse to be said. But this quote comes from one of his characters, which was Death in Hogfather. Human beings make life so interesting. Do you know that in a universe so full of wonders, they have managed to invent boredom? And if we look into that factor of boredom, we look around and say that yes, human beings do tend to encounter a lot of boredom. I'm bored. I don't know what to do with myself. So I'm bringing this quote out today because it's the National Month of Anti-Boredom, which in July, that is what the month is. It's the month of anti-boredom. So therefore, I put together a few ideas of how to resolve boredom, which I found on old.bored.com, which is a fun place to go and visit if you have a chance. These are some of their ways of resolving boredom. It starts with alphabetize the food in your fridge. Apply for a unicorn hunting license.
No, not the unicorn. No.
Achieve the internet.
Archive.
Archive the internet to 3.5 floppy disks, low density, of course. At the bottom of escalators, yell, "My shoelace." Attract lightning. Baby oil the floor. Balance a pencil on your nose. Balance a pillow on your head. There's even more. Make a list of things to do when bored. Make a list of things you want. Make a rubber band ball. Make a sundial. Make a trash can, a basketball hoop, and throw crumpled up paper for baskets. I like this one. Open a box of animal crackers and make an animal farm. Paint your toes, peel grapes. And of course, you could always phone your local government rep and see if you can convince him or her to have lunch with you. So these are just a little bit of a taste of what you can do next time you are sitting there in the beautiful midst of the month of July and saying, "Oh, I'm bored, there's nothing to do." My take on boredom is, let's not be bored. There's plenty to keep you busy. How about you, Dr. Kevin? Do you have any ways of keeping yourself not bored?
Boredom has never really been an issue for
I
me.
didn't think it would be.
I think that sometimes there's a crossover where people end up bored because they don't give themselves permission to have guilt-free relaxation. They don't feel like they're going to do anything. Like, I don't feel like really doing anything. But then there's this, you're supposed to always be doing something. And so then there's, what they do is they get caught in this crunch of, I really want to do a whole lot of nothing, but I feel guilty about it. So if I'm doing a whole lot of nothing, but I claim that I'm bored, then that somehow justifies it. I know that's a very twisted set of thought processes.
Yeah,
but
that thought process, though, yes.
Yeah, the thing is, there are always things, adventures, things we can do when you have a curious mind. If you don't have a curious mind, it means something is interfering with your curiosity, because all humans are born curious. Now, for some people, curiosity might get solved by reading a book. For others, it might be by taking a walk in the woods. Mm-hmm. Curiosity may be satisfied by going and seeing the number of different models and makes of cars that you can shoot on a highway. you know, you can count on a road going by you. We suggest you don't do it by standing in the middle of the highway looking at them oncoming. That might be a little too lively.
Just a bit.
But I think that the thing is, not only do we either not give ourselves permission to be easygoing and relaxed and just say, you know what, I don't feel like doing nothing and nothing is okay. But the other hand of it is that some of the things we might like to do, people frown upon or don't find value in it. So therefore, we don't want to do it. And I hate it when I see parents do this to kids. A kid may be perfectly happy doing something, but whatever that something is doesn't have value in the parent's mind, so they criticize it. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. And so what they do is they set up in this child's mind that there are only certain activities that are acceptable. And if they don't feel like doing any of the acceptable activities, then they're bored. You know? I mean, I've actually, you know, watched parents, you know, have a child who really likes cleaning and organizing and say, now, what are you doing that for? It's a beautiful day. You should go out and play. Now, you know, there are things which I go, yes, there are times when you have to intervene and maybe get a child to go out and play instead of sitting on a computer for 10 hours playing video games. But, you know, I do find that sometimes it's just that because a parent doesn't understand why a child finds enjoyment in something, that they create a negative interrupt in the mind of the child. And that's a terrible thing to do because we're all individuals and we all have different things that float our boat. And in fact, if your child is doing something that you don't understand why it floats their boat, maybe you should do it with them and figure it out. What, you don't like that?
Does that mean I should pace with my granddaughter?
Yeah, I think you should. But, you know, Angie and I were working at her house the other day, and her granddaughter was visiting, and her granddaughter likes to pace. And Angie was saying, you know, why are you pacing? And I looked at you and I said, it's a moving meditation. And you went, oh, okay. See, it's all perspective. It's all how you see things. So, yeah, I don't believe in boredom. I believe in minds that have been trained to give their power away. I believe in a kind of lazy, and I believe in a kind of apathetic and depressed. But I don't really believe in boredom. Sometimes it takes you a little bit to figure out what it is you want to do, and that's that moment of, oh, do I want to read? Do I want to go pick up pine cones and paint them gold and silver? What do I want to do? But that's not necessarily boredom.
Yet you do have a lot of people that will sit there and actually verbally speak their truth and say that they are bored. I don't know what to do with myself.
Oh, well, they should come to me. I can give them a whole list of things. Well, if you don't know what to do, you know, I got boxes that need to be unpacked.
Yeah.
You can help me. I'm always fun to be around.
It's funny that you're saying that because that's part of the piece with the boredom. As you know, we do work along with a lot of nonprofits when we do our show here. And if somebody's really feeling bored in the summertime and they don't know what to do with themselves, there's plenty of nonprofits. Find something that you enjoy doing and then find a nonprofit that has some of that activity. And they'll be happy to have you come and assist and help them out in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's plenty to keep you busy. And they'll be very grateful.
Yes. If you find that you don't have anything to do or there's too much time on your hands, there's a lot of people out there with nonprofits or even not with nonprofits, like nursing homes, or go to the local animal shelter and take the dogs for a walk or whatever. But there's plenty that needs to be done in the world. Yeah. Now, doing nothing, as we've talked in other shows, is not a bad thing.
No, it
if
isn't.
that's what you feel like doing.
No, it's good to take your own break. Your own mental, physical, emotional break is something that everyone needs to do.
Absolutely.
So,
so before the show gets boring, do you want to introduce today's guest?
Yes, before the show gets boring, we have a special guest today. I know quite a lot about him to some extent, but there are some things that I don't really know about him, to be honest with you. And so we decided that this would be a good time, seeing as July. And we've been now on for probably about a month.
5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less.
So it's time for us to get to understand where Dr. Kevin and I come from. So today, it's a Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, who is our guest today to be interviewed upon. And I'm actually going to start out by saying, Kevin, I want you to give them an idea of where you began, and start out, yes, you were born onto this earth plane, but where is it that, you have been, all the ventures that you have gone. This could cover our whole show, people, so we'll start with no ado-s. There you go.
There you go. Okay. Well, first of all, it is my birthday month. We started on your birthday month.
Yes.
But we ended up having so many guests so early on. We were going to do this earlier because we felt like, hey, we started this new show, and some of you are going to be discovering us and go, who is Angie? Who is Dr. Kevin? What are these people? And so, first of all, I want to start with a lot of people have, kind of wondered how I've got into the spiritual business, or where did my spiritual path. I've got a lot of books out and DVDs and CDs, and I'm always talking about people having their own unique spiritual path. Well, I always like to start with, my grandmother first talked to me about being psychic when I was 4. And we were playing a game. I was a couple of months shy of my 5th birthday. I think it was spring. I always have this feeling like it was around May. But my grandmother was babysitting me, and I asked her if we could play a game. And I told her what she looked like when she was my age, how she wore her hair, the name of her best friend, and I sang her the song that they used to sing when they played together, when they were my age. Now, my grandmother sat down with me, and she said, Kevin, you have a gift, and it's a gift from God. But people will tell you that it's bad, or that it's wrong, or that they don't believe you. But as long as it's a gift from God, everything will be okay. Now, what does that mean to a 4 or 5-year-old? Those kind of things. I could tell by the way my grandmother was talking to me that whatever it was good. I wasn't being rebuked. I wasn't being punished. That I'd pleased her or made her happy in some way. That was the energy. But my grandmother was a very wise woman and a great grandmother. And she gave me not 1, but 2 hot homemade donuts, chocolate donuts, and my own plate of sugar, to reward me for something that was very good. And, very interestingly enough, I always held on to that as something that I did that was very good. As my childhood, evolved and unfolded, being a highly psychic child is not easy because a lot of adults don't want to believe you. A lot of people want to question you. A lot of people want to say that you're making up things. And I did have those experiences. I also, I was an ADD child, though they didn't have the term back then. So there was that very powerful creative and very powerful intellect that comes with ADD that also, was playing a factor in my childhood, underneath all of that stuff going on. And because of the life I came in to live, the abuses that I went through as a child started at a very young age as well. Oftentimes people will talk to me about, why do children get molested? Why do they get physically abused? Why do they get emotionally abused? Where's God? And where's these things? And what I have found oftentimes is that people that have gone through very rough childhoods oftentimes used it as a foundation that they built upon to go out and do great good in the world. Now, not all. There are people that have done great evil in the world because of the childhood they had. You can't have black without white. But I have found that some of the most powerful healers were ones that had an abusive childhood, had things going on. And at the same time that I was being applauded for my psychic abilities, at the same time that I was out there and a very bright, curious light, I had very terrible and dark things happening to me.
Yeah.
And so it became the shadow from which my light shined and bounced off of. Mm-hmm. I always found it very amusing that even as a small child, I would go out and, you know, there was always the stories of the family gatherings and things. And I would go, and there was a great aunt who had just lost her husband that I don't think I'd probably ever met at the age of 5. But I went to a family gathering, and there was like 90 people in the room. That's a little intimidating for a small child to have all those people you don't know, especially a small child that's being abused. You know, usually you're looking at depressed or shut down or withdrawn or clingy. I went right over to this woman who had just lost her husband, that was some relative of mine that I had no concept of, crawled up into her lap, looked at her, gave her a hug, told her I loved her, that it would be okay, and kissed her on the cheek. Mm-hmm. And she just started crying. And I just kept on patting her. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I love you. I love you. Why would a 5-year-old do that?
Right. But that's what you're saying is true. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. I find that to be a very true factor when we are actually in our younger years and we build our, if you want to call them psychic abilities or spiritual healing abilities, whatever you want to characterize them as. Generally, it's because you had to be in full awareness or a fuller awareness than the typical child that's growing up. And I too went through not really as much abuse, but as more of like always having to be the one to watch or be concerned about what's around me in my atmosphere. So as you do that, it does bring you to that point of more awareness. That's what it is more awareness and more closeness with your divine. And you look at, as you said, there's people that you have empathy for. And people don't understand that sometimes because where's this child coming from? Especially in the era that we grew up in.
Yep. And, you know, it was one of the famous telltale signs of that era was long before it was coined back in the days of the Clinton administration. Our era was an era of don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
People didn't want to know. I mean, as I went on as an adult and, you know, talked to the people that were adults when I was a small child, and I talked about some of the abuse that I went through, it was surprising how many of them said, well, we knew something was wrong, but you didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. I knew that that man was scary, or I was afraid for you. And I'm thinking, you're afraid for a 4 or 5-year-old, and you're not saying anything, and you're a parent with children that were my age or a little older than me, but you didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. But nobody wanted to talk about my psychic abilities. Nobody wanted to talk about, you know, the fact that many adults knew that something was wrong, and some even suspected I was being molested. But they didn't say anything because nobody talked about it. And then there was the ADD kicker. So, you know, I started life with a bang, not just because I was born on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
When my grandmother passed, when I was 8, she came to the foot of my bed and she said to me that I was still going to need her and that she would still be there for me. I remember my mother coming in the next day and she said to me, you know, your grandmother died last night, and this at this point was her ex-husband's mother, but she was very close to her. And I sat up in bed and I looked at her and I said, what's for breakfast? And my mother shook her head and left the room. And I had this understanding that she thought that I didn't understand death or what she was talking about. But I remember clearly thinking, you know, why is Mommy so upset? Grammy hasn't gone anywhere. Mm-hmm. There was this knowledge that she was still there for me. Yeah. Maybe she wasn't going to make me any more hot homemade chocolate donuts. I might have to do without my own plate of sugar, but Grammy was still there.
Yeah.
I think that, having that mix of such a blessing at the beginning and then such a turbulent childhood. And there was a lot of negativity around my childhood, and there was a lot of things that were working out. And there was a lot of times that I wasn't believed. There was times I was told I was lying, even when there was clear proof that I wasn't, because people couldn't accept that I knew things I wasn't supposed to know, or I was seeing things. I always remember looking at doing mind out of body travel when I was probably about 11 or 12. And at the dinner table that night with my two brothers and my mother and my stepfather, talking about how there was this neat fire in Newcastle and describing it. And my stepfather going, why do you make these things up? Where does this come from? Why are you lying? I mean, I was going to get punished for lying. Next day on the Portsmouth Herald was a picture exactly as I described it.
Description, yeah.
And I showed the paper. I don't want to talk about it. I realized I scared people. I scared people because I saw too much. I scared people because I knew too much. I scared people because I asked questions they couldn't answer. And that part of it was the ADD, that I would see and I would question, I would think. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that one of the problems was that even though they had more experience and more knowledge, I was a lot more intelligent than a lot of the adults around me, and I could outthink them. With whatever I had, I could debate and win more often than not. But winning meant losing, because I would get punished. I would get punished for being right.
So now, let me ask you this. When this all started to occur, where you started to get like punishment or the negativity of what are you doing and how come you're doing this and I don't want to hear that, did that make you feel like you had to pull some of that back in for a while? Or did you just say, no, I'm here and this is it?
I was probably too feisty for my own good. I would still challenge, even though I would get punished. I would still fight. I would try to, figure out the best way around things or to do things. But when I went through periods of giving up, I would really give up. I mean, if I decided that the battle wasn't worth it anymore, if I just couldn't fight the fight anymore, I want to say 3 times as a teenager, I tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, you just pulled it all back in.
I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And, by that point, I mean, like the abuses in my childhood had shifted. When I was very young, they were more physical, sexual, emotionally terrifying, like to scare me. As I got a little older, they just became, and there were different abusers. And so they became more like I was brought up being told constantly I was stupid, that I was lazy, that I would never make anything of myself. And I could choose to take that in and believe it or not. If I chose to take it in and believe it, then I would spiral into depression, then I would get self-abusive, but then I would come back out. I would come back out. And when I would come back out, I would come back out stronger. I would come back out more solidly sure of who I was and what I was here to do. And then the psychic stuff, at 16, I had this woman, she's passed now, but her name was Fran, and I worked at her at the bank, and I started working when I was 12. I started making money because I always knew that at some point, money would be my exit strategy from a young age. And so part of this is, I was working at the bank, and she just kept on getting drawn to me, and we'd talk, and during the summer we talked on lunch breaks and stuff like this, and she was quite a bit older, and she's younger than I am now, but to me as a teenager she was quite a bit older. And she looked at my palm and she wanted to know my birth time, and she asked me some questions. She did this and she did that, and she came back to me and she announced to me when I was 16, that I was here to be a worldwide spiritual leader. And she wanted to be known as the person, who was one of my first mentors. And in fact, my book, Combing the Mirror, one of the people I've dedicated it to was her. Because at that point, I started going to Sunday lunches at her house and was meeting with people that were all 2 to 3 times my age. We would talk about a number of different things. But I was 16. I had a girlfriend that was 5 years older than I was. I was working as many hours as I possibly could. And I was going to high school. So every week, Fran would give me a book and tell me that next week we were going to talk about it and give me a couple books to look through. And then the following week, I would join in the conversations and I'd talk to all of these adults about all of these different spiritual, metaphysical things. Well, one week I screwed up. She talked about Atlantis. And she wanted to know what people thought about Atlantis. And I closed my eyes and I got very quiet for a second. And I started describing what it looked like. And I started describing what it was like to be there. And I started describing, the place and the feeling and the energy. And I open up my eyes and tears are rolling down my face. And I have all these adults looking at me. And I looked and I said, "What's Atlantis?" And Fran said, "Did you read the book?" Because a little of that sounded like Casey, some of that I've never heard before. And I was like, and I'm just kind of looking at her, and I'm still in that very emotional moment of feeling that loss of Atlantis and the fact that I had been there. And she goes, "You didn't read that book, did you?" She goes, "Have you read any of the books I've given you?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of busy and I got a lot of homework." She goes, "You come here every week and you talk about stuff and you add things. How do you do that?" "I just know when you talk about it." She gave me what I call my first metaphysical nickname, which was "You Little." I don't know that I can say the word on public access TV or not, but you can imagine what the word was. And, she had the biggest library I'd ever seen of metaphysical books at the time. We're talking the 70s.
Yes.
But she's like, what did you do with the books? And I said, "Well, I'd leave them beside my bedside. I'd sleep next to them." And that's when I first learned about Edgar Casey and all of those things unfolded. At that time also, somebody who came into my life through a mutual acquaintance, which was Ramona Garcia. And I got an opportunity, 16 going into 17, to start doing professional psychic work at some of Ramona's events back then. Because these were all people that Ramona knew, that was all part of that group. And I didn't know that it was a quote unquote a group, so to speak. Fran had brought me into it, and I met people like Joanne Aldridge, the first astrologer I ever studied with, and Ramona Garcia and Fran Bolduc and all of these different people at the time. And I found a place that felt like home. Because home for me at that point was a lot about, power struggles and intimidation and bullying and me fighting. And I was not an easy child to raise. Bright children are never easy children to raise, because they're going to question, they're going to challenge, and you have to have the emotional makeup of knowing how to deal with a challenging child who sometimes can outthink you. And
Well,
go ahead.
touching on base with Ramona was kind of she's always the homecoming.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, she'll be with us in September. We'll be
good.
having her come here, so you'll get to see her again.
Oh, I love Ramona. I got to see her not too long ago. I hadn't
Yeah.
seen her for years.
Yeah.
Gave her a copy of one of my books, actually.
Yes.
So, so during that period of like 16 to 21, I did a lot of spiritual conscious growth. I did my first ghost clearing. I did my first medical intuitive. But I would drive poor Fran crazy because Fran wanted to be known as my first spiritual mentor. And I liked that I had somebody I could talk to that didn't think I was lying or didn't, get all horrified or wasn't afraid of me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I got the feeling as a child is that I had adults that were afraid of me.
I'm sure you did. I mean, that's Yeah, that's par for the course.
Yeah. So, so part of it was that I developed this technique, which was when somebody would come to me, like my first ghost clearing, somebody would come to me and go, it was so funny. She came on and she said to me, I know you're into all that stuff. Just like that, that stuff. And I go, okay. She goes, now I don't believe in that stuff, but I have this house and people are telling me it's haunted. Now I don't believe in that, but can you get rid of it?
Yeah.
Because she'd inherited a house. I graduated early from high school and was in college by 17. And she'd inherited a house from her parents, and 3 tenants in a row that never met each other all left the house because it was haunted.
Right.
All saying the same thing. And so this is what I would do. It would be like this. I would get very quiet and I'd go, can I do this? And I'd look and I'd go, yep, I can clear the house. And then she'd say, well, will you clear it? And I'd go, do you want me to do this? Okay, yep. That was it. Can I and should I? I just asked God, Goddess, Allah, Buddha, whoever. I didn't even have any, wasn't raised in a traditional religious household. So, I just kind of asked up and I would get this answer. And that took me everywhere from doing ghost clearings, because I called Fran and I said, what are you doing Sunday? And she goes, not much. Why? And I said, well, because I'm going to go clear a haunted house. Do you want to go with me? She's like, do you know, that's very dangerous and you can, blah, 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 blah. I better go. And, and I got these books. And I was like, it's going to be okay. I was told I could do it and I was supposed to. That was life. 16 to 21, that was life for me. All my spiritual stuff was, can I and should I?
Yeah.
And I never worried about it because I knew that it would just come. It would just be there, whatever I needed.
What it needed, yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
In fact, I have a chapter in my book, Combing the Mirror, called I Will Know, which is I will know whatever I need to know whenever I need to know it. But the key is when. We sometimes want information before we need it, and then it just clutters up our brain.
Yeah. Now, as you grew further in, did you enter into the corporate world, or did you stay and open up your own place immediately?
No. I have an interesting, my mother is 80 now, and she's still married to the same man. He's 88.
Yeah.
And I love them both. I mean, I was very close to my own father, who I called Papa. Maybe part of it's because I'm a Cancer. We should ask Dorothy sometime when she's on the show.
Yeah.
But I was very much about, wanting to please my mother. And so she never knew what kind of money I made doing psychic work as a teenager, because I was actually making more money per hour than she was. And maybe if she had known that, she would have been more supportive. My mother is a Capricorn. She really wanted me to be a real person, get a real job,
Right.
go to college, do all of this stuff. And, and it was kind of there was kind of this mixed balance, because on one hand, and again, everything that I talk about is the past. So I don't hold any great hate or judgment or energy. I'm well past the forgiveness stage into I manifested the childhood I needed.
Yeah.
But my stepfather was very negative. He didn't think I should go to college because I'd never be bright enough to make it through college. And so, there was this mixed energy, but I did go to college for business management and psychology. The thing is, it took me 10 years to get my bachelor's, because by the time I was 18, I had my first supervisor's job, because I'd worked at the bank and I had done this. And so I spent a good 12 years focused on building a career, working in a number of different industries. You name it, I worked in the industry, hospitality, restaurants, hotels, banking, financial services, did it all. and I started in accounting and auditing,
Yeah.
which people are always like, you, accounting, auditing? I'm like, oh yeah, I can burn rubber on an adding machine. And finding problems through audit trails, to my last corporate job was as a sales training manager for American Express. So I did the whole circle of corporate, but, and my intuitive would help me, but I'd have to be quiet about it. If I found a problem and showed it to my boss and he said, how did you get it? I would create what I call backward logic, which means I'd get the solution, then it might take a day or two before I present it to my boss, because I'd have to back it into how did I find it, because I knew what the beginning was and I knew what the ending was, but I didn't have
Never
to go.
knew to go look through that.
It's kind of like the person who's really good at math. They can do it all in their head, so they don't need to write it down, but the teacher marks them down if they don't write it
They
down.
don't write it down.
If I ever told my boss, oh yeah, my psychic told me, I'd get a pat on the back and a pink slip. We're talking the 80s.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna happen. So I did do the corporate thing, and then I reached a point where I just knew it was time to change. I went to a Unitarian Universalist church, which is, that's what I am, is Unitarian Universalist, third generation. I went to a church, and I was saying to God, I'm not happy. There's not joy in my life. And I will do whatever I need to do to live the joyful life that I know I'm here to live, whatever it is. And so I went to a UU church in Norfolk, Virginia, and they had women's drumming as the service. Now, how many churches have a women's drumming circle? Actually, I'm going to be bringing in the local UU minister to talk about some of the stuff that the UU church does for this community.
Yeah.
But there's these women who are all drumming, and I'm sitting there at the end of at the back of the church after I had really prayed and meditated and passed my life up and said, Spirit, whatever you want, I'm willing to do. I want to do what I'm here to do, and I want to be living with joy in my life. So all these women were drumming. The service ended. I was the last person to thank them. I mean, the whole congregation went up and thanked all of these women for their drumming in the service, their sermon of drumming. And I walked up to the first woman, and I went to thank her, and I took her hands, and I went, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. Blah, 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 blah. Did an on-spot psychic reading, really helped her. And I went, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I moved to the next woman, and I was like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. I did a reading or a healing on every drummer at the circle. And I walked away, and I said, well, that was the answer. I guess I'm supposed to do, and I took it as I was supposed to go home. I moved from Norfolk back to New England. I went back to my roots, and my roots started with my grandmother in that kitchen when I was 4, that I have this gift from God.
Yeah.
And then I'm here to do something, and that was 26 years ago. And since then I've written over a dozen books and CDs and DVDs. I've opened and closed at least 3 spiritual catalyst practices. My last spiritual catalyst practice, which when I say spiritual catalyst, there's the words, the words are always so limiting.
Yeah.
And everybody has different meanings to the words. And there are still today, if I say I'm psychic, people go, oh, well, people don't like the word psychic. Well, people don't like it when I can tell them to kiss my psychic too. I don't really care. But, it's all about marketing. Intuitive is better. Well, I am intuitive, but I'm psychic. You know what? I'm psychic. I've been psychic, consciously psychic, like a little Mozart since I was 4.
But a spiritual catalyst is much more
intense.
Well,
yeah, because I go in and I go, I'm going to help empower people. I'm going to dig out the stuff. I'm going to put them through a process. If you looked at my practice, sometimes it would have looked more like a psychology practice, almost a therapy. And it was spiritual therapy. At one point I called it spiritual coaching and counseling.
yes.
But spiritual catalyst really goes in and it helps people create more synergy in their life and free up and let go of the little things, and using my psychic to know the questions to ask and the homework to give, because I'm famous for my homework.
Yeah.
You know, that's
You
one
and
of
me
the things.
both.
Yeah,
We have homework.
homework.
That's the way you grow.
That's absolutely, you know.
But you know, so it's like when you got into this though, like you know, it's like you knew as a small child, and then of course when you open yourself back up, honestly speaking, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, they're psychics, so they're going to tell you about the future. That's not what it's about. It's about giving people the concept of where they truly are and who they truly are. And I'm kind of happy to have you bring that analysis from your childhood into your adult life. And it wasn't just saying to them, oh, that, you know, that tree's going to burn down next week. It's like, what can we do to prevent that tree from burning down next week? Or, you know, what can we do to get you to get back out there instead of being stuck? So, you know, that's the achievement.
Well, and I think that one of the things is, you know, as we both agree on, you know, we've had our spiritual conversations per se. You know, the future's not in granite. Psychic should be used as a source of information with which to make better decisions, make changes, you know, evolve. But it can, you know, it can ferret things out. It can illuminate things. You can't change what you're not aware of. It can help you bring things to the surface. And, you know, I started by doing readings at a place called the Mustard Seed in downtown Portsmouth. I mean, the owner was an old friend of mine. She'd been trying to get me to do readings for years. She was trying to get me to do readings when I was in the corporate world, you know, part-time, because we'd gone back, and she knew, she knew me from my play days with all the psychic and spiritual stuff. But what I found very quickly, and this is the thing that is the big danger, is people want to give their power away to psychics. They want to become dependent on psychics. I would have people that would come 2 or 3 times and want me to make their decisions for them, or, you know, basically they wanted to abdicate. And so very early on, when I started my practice, I realized that abdication wasn't going to work for me. It was like, I don't want to run your life for you. I don't want the responsibility of your life. I will work with you to become your version of me. Because people want to be me. I want to be more like you. No, you don't want to be me. Trust me, you don't want to be me. But you can be your version of me, which is somebody who's more self-aware, more in touch with their own gifts and talents, are using them more consciously. That I can help you do. And that's how my first practice evolved. And at the time, because I was having a great love affair with Miss Marple. Have you ever seen Miss Marple? Miss Marple, you know, the Agatha Christie Miss Marples?
Oh, yeah.
Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple. So when I first started my practice, I called myself a spiritual detective. That people would come to, because I said, I'm not going to do ongoing psychic readings with you, but I would be a spiritual detective, where I would use my gifts and abilities to be a detective in your life to figure out why you were not all you were here to be. And that's how I languaged it early on, as the spiritual detective. And because, you know, I was brought up being taught that you should always stay busy, I learned how to crochet and knit and sew and do all of those things. So I would sit there with a client that would be going through a process of getting their life into a better place, and I'd be working on a bedspread or an Afghan, and I'd sit there and I'd crochet or I'd knit with my clients. And when they finished the process, I'd give it to them. Only a few ever got them. I wore past that because I decided if I was doing this, I couldn't be doing this, which was writing the homework that I wanted to give them, and doing that. And so that's been the evolution. Was I went spiritual detective to spiritual coach and counselor, using the word coach long before it's used like it is today. But saying, there's a component of what I'm doing that's like counseling, but there's a component of giving people tools and helping them develop skill sets.
Yes.
That's so important. And that's when empowerment became such an important word for me. And I always define empowerment as the power to be uniquely who you are without apology. And that's the piece people don't get. Every time you have to apologize for who you are being disempowered. You should never have to apologize for being who you are. You can apologize that somebody took it offensively. I'm sorry that you took that offensively, and we can talk about it. But I'm not sorry that I am ADD. I'm not sorry that I am a gay man. I am not sorry that I am psychic. I'm not sorry that I am brilliant, handsome, and fabulous. I'm just not sorry. I'm all those things, and it's okay. And I'm not sorry that sometimes I can be a pain in the neck or lower areas. I'm okay with that too. And I'm sure you'll find this surprising. Every now and then people have referred to me as intense.
Yeah.
And I'm not sorry about that either. So the two things that became closest to my heart were working with people individually. I used to call it, in fact, I used to do a talk called Get It, You Got It, You Came With It. So kind of, you don't have to go looking everywhere for it. It's all in you. You just have to find it. So working with individuals one-on-one to help them move forward, and then teaching. And doing things like this show, which is educating. This is a type of educating. But so my first partner and I, Dara Jane, we would laugh because we'd say we had this tag team going. That sometimes I would refer to myself as a healer who teaches, and she'd refer to herself as a teacher who does healing. And sometimes we'd reverse it. But healing is just to make whole. In helping somebody evolve into their wholeness, teaching is always going to be part of the process. And when you're truly teaching and educating, you're healing. Because it's with that knowledge and that information and those tools and those skill sets that you become more of who you're here to be on the earth plane.
Right. And the whole thing too with you, okay, and I mean, this is a concept that I know of, and I know that you share as well as I do. A lot of the tools or a lot of the guidance in the teaching process aren't of those of the earth plane. They're more of what the spirit is telling us that this person truly needs or what this person truly desires. And so it doesn't come from a textbook, so to speak. It comes from the heart of the divine.
Absolutely. And the more that we are in alignment with our own divine self. And I was actually asked this weekend to come up with a few quotes that place where I'm teaching classes through Om Time experts. I'm going to be teaching classes, and they said come up with 3 quotes that we can put on memes and promote your work. And of course there was always the empowerment quote. Then there was the one about don't let somebody else's inability to see your greatness and your gifts give you their disability. Because we often try to call somebody disabled because we don't understand how their abilities function or what they are. But, you know, as I was kind of looking at those quotes, part of what stood out to me, because I have a whole bunch of Dr. Kevin quotes, you know, to put stuff out there, was really that piece of understanding that in healing to make whole, and that in claiming our divinity, that no man nor does humanity ever suffer from people coming together to discover the God within. It only suffers when they take their God and make sure and try to make everybody else pray to it like they do. And I almost used that as one of my quotes, but I didn't, because they asked me for 3, and so I kept them those 2, and another one kept them short. But you know, in our search for our inner divine, it is human folly that makes us feel more comfortable or feel more validated if other people pray the way we pray, worship the way we worship, or define God the way we define. It's only our own insecurities that make us have to try to force others to do it our way. Because if we all simply were praying and living the words of a loving, abundant, inclusive God, spirit, universe, we would have nothing to fight about. There would
Correct.
be nothing to fight about.
You're right. It's funny you bring that up. I just had a incident yesterday where one of my prior students had written to me and had asked me, I have a person who is a Christian, and they're denouncing me because I offered them Reiki. And they have told me that in the Bible, that Reiki is not commended and that only Christ is a healer, and that we are not supposed to heal through Reiki or any other false pretense. So this person, my student, was trying to actually find some way to give them the truth of how he felt when he was offering healing. For those who don't know, Reiki is a form of energy healing through your divine consciousness. So I wrote back and I kind of said to him, I said, don't bother to argue this out. There's no argument there to have. And I gave him a few quotes from the Bible that pretty clearly stated, the fact that the prophets, the disciples all went out and healed. Christ healed. And so therefore, if we are all part of the divine, we all have that opportunity to be there. And healing is intention. Healing is love. Healing is being there and praying for a person. But because of their diversity and how their Bible is spoken versus how this other person looks at the world, they were clashing. I said, don't argue about it. Just,
No.
it is what it is.
No.
In your eye, it's yours, and it's his eye, it's his, but let it be.
Yep.
So here you go. It's a constant.
I always love this thing, which a friend of mine first introduced me to. In this day and age, it's hard to say where something originated sometimes. But the one thing she said to me was, if you don't want to have a tug of war with somebody, drop the rope. Just drop the rope. You can't, they can't fight with you if you won't fight back.
That's right.
And the fighting is that place that we get lost in, trying to prove we're right. One of the things that I always say, and I know we're wrapping up, but one of the things I always say to people that when I start teaching a class or doing a talk is, I'm going to give you the perspective of the world that I have. I'm going to tell you what I know to be true according to the life I've led and the places I've come from and what my psychic has told me. If it resonates to you, take it. Look at it as a gift. Make it one of the cobblestones in your path. Because I always talk in Combing the Mirror about we all have our own unique spiritual path, and it's all these different cobblestones of experiences and knowledge. If it doesn't resonate to you, let it go. You don't have to take it. If it really, really irritates you, then we should talk about it because it's telling you something you don't want to hear. But I won't fight with people anymore. I spent too much of my life fighting to just have people be okay with the fact that I was okay with who I was, that I didn't feel a need to change. I feel a need to evolve, so I'm always changing, but I don't feel a need to change for anyone else.
Just yourself.
Just myself. Just evolve the way I am. So, I know as we're getting ready to close the show, anything
this is the wrap up.
This is the wrap up. Do you have anything you want to promote before we go?
Not really too much going on. We do have our event at the end of July, July 23rd. That's going to be up in Laconia. That one is going to be a full day right across from Weirs Beach. It's going to be at the Weirs Beach Community Center. We'll have a labyrinth for those that want to come in try out a labyrinth. We'll have some sound healers. We will have all kinds of different readers and crystals, all whatnot. Just come and have a good time. It's free to open to the general public. Come up and enjoy the Lakes region and visit us. How about yourself?
My month is moving into my new place, going
That's
to
right.
Phoenix to close out my old place, staying pretty busy doing that stuff. I will be starting to teach classes in the Nashua, the greater Nashua Hudson area in the fall. If you're interested in knowing more about that, you can write to me at Dr. Kevin, DRKVIN, at weboflight.com. Or you can write to Angie at weboflight.com if you think you have somebody that could be part of the show or someone you'd like to see us interview, or that might be you. We invite you to come in and to share with us. Probably my most popular class for 26 years has been my psychic development course. Developing your psyche is developing your relationship with the divine, with your own divine, with the inner divine, to give you more information with which to make better decisions. I invite you to come play to be more of who you are. Namaste.